Hello, and welcome to Storytime with One Big Hoax. I'm your host, Trina Hoax. In today's episode, we're tackling a case that's shrouded in controversy and tragedy. A story of a wrestling superstar, a young woman with a bright future, and a death that haunted the wrestling world for decades. This is the story of Nancy Argentina. The year was 1986. The wrestling world was in the midst of its golden age. Hulk Hogan was a household name, WrestleMania was a new phenomenon, and a new generation of larger than life characters were captivating audiences around the globe. One of the biggest stars on the rise was Jimmy-Superfly-Snuka. Known for his high-flying moves and his wild, charismatic persona, Snuka was a fan favorite, a hero to millions. But behind the scenes, away from the roaring crowds and the flashing cameras, Jimmy Snuka was living a life that was far from heroic. His girlfriend was Nancy Argentino. She was just 23 years old, full of life, and had dreams of a career in the medical field. She was a quiet, kind-hearted woman who, by all accounts, was deeply in love with Jimmy. The couple lived together in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and shared a seemingly ordinary life in an extraordinary world. But their relationship was far from perfect. Friends and family of Nancy would later describe a pattern of abuse, a dark secret that Nancy kept hidden from the world. On May 10th, 1986, the illusion of a perfect life shattered. Jimmy Snuka made a frantic 911 call from their hotel room. He reported that Nancy had fallen, hit her head, and was struggling to breathe. When paramedics arrived, they found Nancy unconscious, gasping for air. Her body was covered in bruises and cuts. She was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. Nancy Argentino was pronounced dead the next day from what the coroner would later determine was craniocerebral injuries, a fancy way of saying a massive head trauma. The initial investigation was puzzling. Snuka's story was inconsistent. He claimed Nancy had fallen and hit her head, but the injuries on her body told a different story. The bruises on her arms, legs, and back were too numerous, too severe, to be from a simple fall. A suspicious death investigation was launched. The coroner, a man with a reputation for being thorough and unyielding, ruled the death a homicide. He believed Nancy's injuries were not accidental, that they were the result of a deliberate act of violence. But here's where the story takes a turn. Despite the coroner's findings, despite the suspicious circumstances, no charges were filed against Jimmy Snuka. The case went cold. The wrestling world and the public at large moved on. The death of Nancy Argentino became a footnote, a dark rumor in the history of a beloved wrestling superstar. For years, Nancy's family fought for justice. Her sisters, heartbroken and angry, refused to let Nancy's memory be forgotten. They hired a lawyer, they wrote letters, they talked to anyone who would listen, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. The wrestling world, a tight-knit community, seemed to close ranks. The fame and celebrity of Jimmy Snuka seemed to overshadow the tragic death of Nancy Argentino. Fast forward to 2013, a new generation of reporters and investigators, inspired by the dogged determination of Nancy's family, began to dig into the cold case. An article published in the Morning Call, a newspaper in Allentown, reignited public interest. The article, which detailed the original investigation and the coroner's report, put pressure on the district attorney's office to reopen the case. In 2015, almost 30 years after her death, a grand jury was convened. The grand jury, after hearing new testimony and reviewing old evidence, came to a shocking conclusion. They indicted Jimmy Superfly Snuka for third-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter. The world was stunned. The wrestling icon, now in his 70s, was finally facing justice, but the legal battle was far from over. Snuka, suffering from dementia and other health issues, was deemed incompetent to stand trial in 2016. His health was deteriorating rapidly, and the court ruled that he was not mentally fit to assist in his own defense. In January 2017, Jimmy Superfly Snuka died. With his death, the case was closed. The man accused of killing Nancy Argentino would never stand trial. The family of Nancy Argentino would never get their day in court. justice, it seemed, had been delayed for so long that it was ultimately denied. The story of Nancy Argentino is a cautionary tale. It's a story about the dangers of celebrity worship, the power of a good old boy network, and the devastating impact of domestic violence. It's a reminder that behind every headline, behind every larger than life character, there's a human story, and sometimes those stories end in tragedy. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Storytime with One Big Hoax. I hope you'll join me again for another story. Bye bye.